Good evening and welcome to the November 13th Planning Commission meeting. If you can please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This evening, we have a number of administrative items and one public hearing. Regarding the public hearing, there's a sign-up sheet if you're here for that. If you wish to speak on that item, please sign up. If we can have roll call, Shannon?
Messina?
Here.
Fleming?
Here.
Ingalls?
Here.
Lutrip?
Here.
Mandel?
Here.
Rumpler?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Okay, thank you. I need an approval of minutes for October 9th, 2018.
So moved.
I have a motion for approval of minutes at first.
Second.
Second, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Public comments, and that would be anyone that is here that wishes to speak on any subject other than what's on the agenda for this evening. Okay. And staff comments. Hillary.
All right, good evening, commissioners. So you'll notice your packet is a little thick tonight, even though we expect it to be a shorter meeting. We do have the 3 urban renewal items included in here, and so we'll talk through that in a bit, but just wanted to apologize for a little bit of the delay in getting the packets out. We had to work through the logistics with some attorneys to make sure everything was included, and we had to make sure it hit tonight's hearing or tonight's date for our meeting, as well as future council meetings, just to stay on track for creating a new urban renewal district. So just wanted to say that up front. The December 11th meeting, we have 2 big items. The one is that River's Edge, the property owned by Lance Douglas. So that 3-part request where he agreed to postpone that hearing. So that'll take place on December 11th, and we will have the traffic study findings from the draft report in time for the meeting on the 11th. And then we also have a request from Belle Reve for an amendment to their PUD. And then also you might see a familiar face, and I think some of you spoke with him before the meeting, but we have an intern in the planning department, Jake Geringer. He was a planning commission student rep from 2010 to 2012, and he is interning with us and helping us with the scope of work for the comprehensive plan update and helping us research some public engagement techniques. So it's great to have him.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Appreciate the help. That's it? Okay. At this time, we'll go into the administrative items, and Hillary will do the presentation.
All right, so as you can see in the packet, there is a request from Larry Fluitt for an extension of Planning Commission approvals. And there's 3 items that were approved with the Lilac Glen project. So there was the subdivision, so the preliminary plat subdivision request, the planned unit development, and then there was a special use permit request for a minimal care facility. And this was on approximately 13 acres between Pennsylvania Avenue, Fernand Hill Road on Lilac Lane and off of Interstate 90. So the request is for a 12-month extension of all 3 of those approvals. And as you can see, kind of the prior actions in here, the project was approved in 2014. They came forward for an extension request in 2015. They have made some progress, but in working through some challenges they've had, they haven't been able to do as much as the city would have liked, nor that they would have liked. And so due to some of these unforeseen circumstances, they would like to request, and city staff and legal feel that it's appropriate, because we recognize that we probably were part of some of that delay as well, that they be granted another year extension for all 3 approvals. And then if that expires, if they haven't made all the headway they need to, they'd have to come back again. So the request is for the extension of all 3 this evening, and that would be good for a year, so through 2019. And the other alternative would be if the Planning Commission's not comfortable with that, and if you deny the request, they would have to reapply. So wanted to bring that forward to you and let you know that the prior conditions would still be in effect if the extension was granted. And the applicant and representatives are here. If you have any specific questions for them, or if you have any questions for city staff, I could help answer those, as well as Randy Adams.
Question.
Question, yeah, John.
Hillary, my recollection is that, and this may have had something to do with the big economic downturn in 2008, that my recollection is the city kind of recognized the need for greater flexibility. And it's my understanding that, in my recollection, that the code was changed to allow for 5 one-year extensions. And before that, extensions were a little bit more limited. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so, with that recognition of, the need for greater flexibility, I think was kind of with the understanding that there's really little downside risk here, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Hillary?
Looks to me like conditions number 3 and also number 10 have already been addressed and taken care of. Is that correct, based on the discussion points in our notes?
Yes, the bridge structure culvert and the sewer, that is correct.
Okay.
Anything else? Go ahead, make a
I would, again, I reiterate, I think there's little downside risk. I think there has been recognition by our city council with staff's recommendation that the code has been amended to recognize the need for greater flexibility and sometimes multiple one-year extensions, and this is not inordinate. So I would motion that we grant this flexibility with a second one-year extension.
Okay.
I'll second that one.
I have a second. Do we roll call or just no, just a motion? I have a
Just a motion
first by
vote.
Ingalls, second by Ward. All in favor of?
Aye.
Aye.
The one-year extension request for SP 4-14, SP 6-14, and a PUD -3-14 passes. Okay, next. Yeah.
All right, great. So we have, next up, there are the 3 items related to the urban renewal districts. So what we're going to do is I'll just kind of kick it off, and then Phil Boyd with Welch Comer is going to come up and do a presentation just to kind of walk you through what's been going on in coordination with Ignite CDA and the city in relation to creating a new Atlas Urban Renewal District and the expansion of the river and the lake districts. But what I wanted to do is kind of kick this off and just help focus the commission on your role in this. So we've been working on this Atlas project for about 1.5 years. So the city purchased the property earlier this year. It's 47 acres. We're working on having it developed with the preservation of the shoreline for the public and having a green belt and open space. And so this is really a critical part in this whole process for us, is to create a new district so that we can pay for having this public access to the waterfront. So the city paid $8 million, and we're trying to pay ourselves back, and Ignite's going to help us work through that process. We're going to, as you see in some of the urban renewal plans, create design guidelines. We're going to have a planned unit development. All those things will lock it in, as well as an annexation agreement. So really, the discussion tonight should just be focused on, do the 3 urban renewal plans before you conform with the comprehensive plan? And so Phil will walk you through that. And the critical steps in this are tonight's meeting, and then this will be going forward to City Council next week for a public hearing and for the first reading of the 3 ordinances. And then it'll go back to City Council on December 4th for another reading of the ordinances and consideration of those. And then hopefully we will be able to complete the process of creating a new district and expanding the Atlas, or creating Atlas and expanding the river and lake districts. So.
Okay.
I will turn it over to Mr. Boyd.
Okay. Phil, I just want to swear you in just for the record.
Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Messina and Commissioners. I'm going to walk through a presentation, and Chairman, if it's appropriate, if you want the commission to ask questions while I'm going through the presentation, I'm glad to take them.
That's fine.
Okay.
Whatever they'd like to do.
Could you, your wish welcome, could you tell us what your role is in this whole process?
Very good. You've beat me to the punch a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So I am a consultant to Ignite CDA. Our firm was selected through a qualification-based selection process to work on this project. Tony Burns wanted me to send his apologies. He wanted to be here tonight, but he is under the weather. So we would have been here working on it together, but he's not feeling well, so he couldn't be here. So I'm covering the entire gamut. Okay? So as Hillary said, I'm going to walk through a little bit what we've been working on and demonstrate how the urban renewal districts meet the comprehensive plan. And as Hillary said, there's the expansion of the river district, the expansion of the lake district, and the creation of the Atlas district. And I'll show you those areas as we get towards the end of the presentation. I put this, I like this slide. 1998, it doesn't seem like long ago, but then when you do the math, it was 20 years ago. So for those of us that have been here a while, it seems like not long ago, but that's what it used to look like. I'll direct you, the parcel we're talking about is this parcel, not including the triangle piece, which is owned by Mr. Douglas, not including River's Edge. But I like to use this slide because it kind of gives the entire site context. Also includes these parcels over here. Another context site to kind of give you perspective of where it's at. I know all of us are familiar with it, but again, kind of understanding where we're at in the system, the Atlas Road, and this is the Atlas waterfront site. This is a slide that we put together. Hillary and I started talking about this several months ago, and we were talking about density, actual density surrounding the site. And again, this is almost informational background. It's interesting, and you guys are familiar with seeing these colors. Red is very high density. The gray is commercial property, and then a variety of densities in here. This will be coming, Mr. Douglas's project will be coming before you, as Hillary said, in December. That's currently shown at 17 to 34 units an acre. The blue running through here is the parcel that's owned by the city. It continues on through the Atlas waterfront site. This is the site master plan. This was developed with a public process involved with it, balanced with the realities of real estate. On our team, we have an urban design company that does very large-scale developments like this, and we also have a real estate advisory company that does very large-scale projects like this. And remember, the objective, and Hillary pointed this out at the beginning, was for Ignite to be able to assist the city with funding the purchase of the property, plus create a development while pulling out the most valuable piece of property, which is the waterfront. And so it is a tall order to make that pencil and keep it in the black. And that was the objective of doing a site master plan and a financial feasibility report. I won't bore you with the many details, but we ultimately got there. The Ignite board decided to move forward with it, and that's why you see the urban renewal plans in front of you now. I'll give you just a little overview of this. These products that are shown in here are townhomes. These are single-family lots. Up in here is multifamily product, commercial along this edge. You can see more townhomes here, backed behind with either a multifamily or a condominium type product. Single family up here, condominium products, townhomes, a commercial parcel down on the waterfront. This nature park up here is a product of what's there. And if you're familiar with the site, it's called Mount Hink. Hillary and I still have yet to figure out why it's named Mount Hink. But that parcel is, for the most part, unbuildable without a significant amount of remediation to it. And the remediation is so expensive that it's currently just pulled out as a nature park. That may change as we do some more soils exploration around the perimeter of it, but the unsuitable material is about 75 feet below the southeast elevation. So you can imagine how, you see how high it is out there, and then you go down another 75 feet. So there's quite a bit of unsuitable material in there. The road network that you see in here, primary boulevard or a roadway running through here, it shows continuing on towards Bellarive. That's not any kind of certainty, and I've been admonished by the mayor to point that out every time I speak about this, that there's no certainty in that. It's likely that the road will end right here. Suzanne comes in and creates the connection. This is a connection up to Celtice Way. There we go. So the process leading up to this meeting, community engagement. The CDA 2030, Hillary and her team, Councilwoman Kiki Miller kicked off this core vision group meeting in February. If any of you attended it, it was actually very well done, and it really kicked off our team when we started into the process, because to some extent we were starting with a blank slate. The direction we had received from the Ignite board and from the mayor and the city council was we want to have this project as much as possible reflect community values. And I think all of us know the number one community value is leave the waterfront in public space. But again, that's a tall financial challenge. So that helped us get kicked off. We moved into the public presentation in an open house. We did an initial one in March, did a second one in April, did a city council workshop with Ignite down at NIC. From there, we had quite a bit of direction, and we moved right into the site master plan, which you just saw the process there. And then we moved into the financial feasibility, and those are really intertwined because you're modifying the site plan, running the numbers on the finances, modifying the site plan. That process in itself meets one of the comp plan goals of project financing, managing in-house finances. Remember, the city is a key financial partner in this, and they need to get paid back. There's also long-term tax increment involved with this. And so that process, the financial feasibility, again, in my opinion, meets that comp plan goal. The urban rural district expansion and creation that I'm going to talk about was the next process that we moved into, and that is quite a complicated process, establishing the boundaries and working through that with the Ignite's legal staff. The next step we're going to move into, and Hillary alluded to this in her opening, was site development standards, plating, and the PUD. That's where we're headed next, and so you'll start to see us a little bit more. During the annexation hearing, there was quite a bit of discussion about the PUD. When we were moving through the site planning process, it became pretty clear to us to protect the values of what happens in that area, create a neighborhood that is unique and special, starting with development standards, which is a little bit unique for our area, very tightly done, will allow us to allow the Ignite in the city to control and maintain the quality of the product that moves, that is ultimately built there. So you'll be part of the site development process. Certainly Hillary's staff will be, and we'll move through, and that's kind of our next step. Also part of the next step that we're starting on now is the waterfront public space design. One of the mayor's key objectives, when the decision was made to create that waterfront public space, he said, well, let's put it to use. Let's get it developed. Let's make it usable. When can that happen? And of course, I gave him a schedule that he said, that doesn't work. I want it going in 2019. So we're working very hard to get it under construction in 2019, and it'll become a very usable space in 2020 once we get into the spring of that year, because things will have grown and taken root and whatnot. That also has the added benefit of when developers come in to buy pieces of the property, they see that the park is done and the public space is completed, and they don't have to say, well, is the city really going to complete this? It's a funded project, Ignite's behind it, and we're moving forward with it. And that part, the natural environment, pay close attention to context, sustainability, and urban design. Number 4, or number 5 and number 6 satisfy that goal, because we're being very deliberate and careful about the urban design process. We're also being very careful about the shoreline. And if you guys have spent any time down there, there's parts of that shoreline that are very eroded. And we're doing a very complex hydrodynamic analysis of the waterfront to control the erosion, stabilize it with both vegetative and structured stabilization. We've been working with DEQ and the tribe and the city staff to make that happen. And then finally, site infrastructure improvements and Ignite CDA guided They call it property disposition, selling the property. That'll start sometime in 2019 and move on to 2025 is the estimated absorption of the project, which means it may still be under construction, but it wouldn't be in Ignite's hands anymore. It would be in the private sector. So that's kind of the process just leading up to this. I know that's a mouthful, but are we good? Should I keep forging ahead? Okay. Again, the parcel, you guys have seen this before, River's Edge. The triangle piece up here, if you hear me refer to the triangle piece, that is the parcel that the city currently has an MOU with Mr. Douglas, that they'll transact, generally speaking, this parcel for some waterfront access in exchange for the railroad right-of-way. That's a key element, because if you think about that, we now have waterfront access all along this more or less 4,000 feet, along another 1,500 feet here, then it would kick up into the old railroad corridor all the way out to Johnson Mill River Park and on to Hutter Road. So it's a really key deal, and the city administrator, Mike Gridley, and the mayor have been working very diligently to make that happen, and it's hopefully that'll come to pass. That's just a schematic of the Douglas parcel. This is the city and Ignite development. So one of the key things when we started the site design on this, we started from the objectives of connectivity, both vehicle, pedestrian, bike, and views and vistas. Because through the public process, that's what we heard day in and day out. There you can see that's pretty clear road connectivity. Again, this connection down here is in question, and Hillary mentioned we're working on the transportation impact study that will inform the necessity of that connection. There's also pedestrian connections and bike connections, and then there's these key intersections, and you can see that this road design is intended, when you come into it, you're looking right down to the river. And so you have these really great vistas as you travel down that road. You're looking right out into it. There'll be quite a feature there, a plaza that you can go out and just head right out into the waterfront. So from the comp plan goals, vistas, we're sensitive to that. The community design, the connectivity through the city, the community design discouraging sprawl, that's one of the goals. I don't know if it's appropriate to characterize this as infill because it's a massive infill project, but it is infill if you think about what currently surrounds it. We're promoting connectivity, and we're providing for all forms of transportation. I'll point you out to this over here. We took one of the early concepts for the transportation hub that the county is putting in there. That is right in that area. The Centennial Prairie Trail comes right along there, so you can imagine the connectivity that folks that might live here would be able to go and get onto transit right in that location. So that's been in the back of our mind as well. Zooming in a little bit more back to the site plan here, promoting within the development itself. If you were to just think about the follow the green trees, we have created connections throughout this area where you've got both bike and pedestrian loops within the neighborhood. Because if we think about how we use our neighborhoods, you have your short loop that you do with your dog, and you have your long loop that you might go take a run on, and then you've got your giant loop that you might go on a bike ride on. Those all were in the back of our minds when we were laying out the connective network within this area. These neighborhoods, you can see we've got a mix of uses in here, the neighborhood retail, apartments, the riverfront restaurant down in that area. Comp plan goals that we think we're achieving there, the diversity, retail, offices, the workforce development type housing. The product type there was intentionally not single type. Townhomes, multifamily, single family, condominiums. There's lots of reasons to do that because you're obviously trying to hit multiple points in the market so it's absorbed differently, but you're also trying to serve multiple demographics. And again, this is a common planning principle I think you guys know about. Trying to avoid a homogeneous neighborhood is a good thing. So you have a diversity of economic folks that are in there. And that was also in the back of our mind when we were laying out this subdivision. Obviously, business enhancement and urban renewal, city and the Ignite have a partnership. I've talked already about the pedestrian bicycle environment, live, work, and recreate, and then the cooperative partnership. Just a little bit about the cooperative partnership. The way that Ignite intends to dispose of the property, sell it, will be through an RFP process. And so they will put out an RFP. It will have certain criteria. It will be driven by the development standards. So you all will be involved in the development standard process. It'll be driven by that and the PUD. The RFP goes out to a number of developers, and they come back in with a whole bunch of factors: pricing, product type, how soon they plan to build it, and all those things. So that will be the way that Ignite moves through that process. A little bit more on here: managed growth, diversity of suitable housing forms, neighborhoods, the transitions. To the west, obviously, is potentially a relatively high density development, buffering that with commercial in that area. And on this end, the existing density we know about, and trying to create a nice transition in that area with a little bit more multifamily. And again, all income statuses that we're trying to hit. Let's see. And then managed growth, connectivity and open spaces coordinated with other cities. I mentioned earlier the transportation hub that will occur here. Probably the most important one is our own city in Coeur d'Alene, creating that nice connectivity through it. And then preserving and protecting existing neighborhoods. So all of that goes into this final product here, which is the proposed districts. This is an existing Lake District area here. I'm going to skip forward to this one. The River District currently surrounds the site, and the expansions occur here from the River District and here from the River District. And that might seem a little funny why they're disjointed like that, but the objective is, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into this process, how much capital currently exists in the district, what the increment is available as the district moves forward, and where you plan to start your work first in the subdivision. So this is one of the first phases of the subdivision. This is also one of the first phases, because you can imagine if you build the park, they will come, including the parking lot. And we don't want the public parking in the neighborhood. We want them parking in the parking lot, so we need to give them a connection to it through Suzanne. The park is in the Lake District, and then the Atlas District is all the future phases of the project, and that's the brand new district. So expansion down here, expansion here and here, and then the new district in this area, including the Douglas parcel to the west. So that is a quick run through. I hope that was useful, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, that was good.
Questions?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
The approximate size of these commercial footprints, I see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 commercial properties. General size of these?
So you're gonna get me to reach back into my memory on what the number 160,000 square feet.
In total?
In total sticks in the back of my mind, but I would need to actually dig in. There's a massive spreadsheet behind what you see here that we use for the financial feasibility model, because we were tweaking all of those things. If you run the commercial up and drive the townhomes down, what does it do if you run the townhomes up? One of the things that Tony Burns likes to continue to point out is this will change. As we move through this next step of development standards, master platting, early on when Hillary and I were looking at this, she had pointed out, and it was repeated by a bunch of folks on our team, is, gee, we should think about putting a little bit more commercial in here. So the next time you folks might see this, there might be a little bit more commercial over here. Maybe this stays, maybe it changes a little bit.
So Phil, during the time we go through design standards, I would imagine that's going to take a little time. Is there a timeline on when you would do start the design standards? How's that going to work? What's the process for the design standards for whatever might be there? Not so much this plan being the ultimate layout, because things change depending on the timeline. So that's what I'm asking, the design standard timeline. Do you have any idea?
I'll give you a broad brush overview of it. We laid out a scope of work, obviously, because we have to engage our client, Ignite, and the city. They're kind of one and the same. With that scope of work, I had sent the layout to Hillary and what we were thinking about. And what we intend to do is we're going to start with Hillary and her staff and kind of say, here's where we think we're headed. She obviously works with you on a regular basis, and we'll start to put the bones of a presentation together. Then we intend on having a workshop where we're actually going to bring product forward to the commission. You'll then give guidance, make commentary on it. We'll go back, tweak it some more, come back, and do a couple of meetings with the staff and commission to get to the point where we're trying to accomplish two things. One, Ignite needs to have the flexibility to respond to the market. So the design standards need to address a variety of product type in there, but we also need to achieve our objective of creating a great place in Coeur d'Alene and not having a neighborhood go off the rails where none of us want to see that happen. So that's the balance we intend to strike here, which hopefully we can do that. Once that's done, we'll move into the planning phase. We anticipate that occurring over the next 3.5 months. So we'll be kicking it off in earnest in December and then working hard in the first part of the spring to keep moving forward on it.
And what would those design standards include as far as, I mean, do you have any idea what you'd be looking at to?
Product type, setback, dense, how the house sits on the lot, how tall they're going to be, what the streetscape's going to look like. All the things that we want to be able to, when a buyer comes in, we want to be able to hand them the design standards. They can look through it and say, okay, we understand what the intent is here. Not something we're interested in because we don't do those types of things. Or, gee, we love it. And we'll move through that. Part of our process as well is we're not doing that in a vacuum. The folks on our team routinely do this and understand the market, but we're also going to be out talking to developers and builders and showing them the ideas to make it informed, because I can guarantee you when we get kicked up to city council, that's a question that we're going to get. Did you talk to the local builder so-and-so to make sure that this might be something they may be interested in? So we're trying to address all those. We'll never be perfect at it because you always have to strike that balance, but that is the intent.
And with that in mind, the design standards being not set in stone, because we don't know when a developer or someone might want to come in and develop or purchase a section of single-family homes or whatever. And if those design standards are approved through city council, and then a developer wants to say, well, that's a great package, but can we change something within those design standards? How would that process work if that does come about?
Our intent is that the design standards, there'll obviously be a process in there to modify the design standards, but there'll be some threshold that we're going to have to figure out here and here, at what point it's gone too far, and it has to come back to this commission. And I think during our development of those standards here, we're going to have to identify where that line exists. Because we're probably never going to capture it all perfectly. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but we have to have some sort of strategy that we can all say, when it gets to this point, if the density changes, if the product type looks so different, you need to come back here. And I think that's the way we would approach it, Chairman.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, because we've seen Riverstone develop over years, and it's come back to us many times. I think the process that you're doing is great as far as creating the design standards. And I express my opinion, and it's my opinion that any change should come back to us regardless how small or large it is. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's going to happen. But I think because this will be a project that's going to be developed over probably years, that things are going to change. So again, my opinion is I'm kind of focusing on the design standards. I don't have concern that the general public won't have access to waterfront. I think they will. Connectivity is all there, as this is, so those items I'm not too concerned with. It's what's going to be there that's going to be, help develop this through Ignite and/or just sale of private property.
And it is a little bit unique that the Ignite and the city are the landowners, because their metrics are very different than a private developer's. Their vision is, they obviously have to crack a nut early on because there's money that needs to move back into the city. There's things that need to happen. But on the other hand, their view is very, very long because they have increment to consider and things like that. That's not to say they want to drag their feet, because Tony Burns and his board, which includes the mayor, are anxious to get this moving along. So they will want to be light on their feet and have the design standards set up in a way that they can make adjustments without having to come back here, because they want to be able to make decisions quickly and strike deals, so to speak. But I think we will need to identify that line where we think it's gone too far, and
Okay,
we need to be back here.
And if I've read the package correctly, or some of the documentations here, I believe the first development would be the waterfront, as far as access for public and such.
Yes, that's the intent, is to complete what you see here on the waterfront, not including the day-use docks down here.
Right.
But complete that work in 2019. So construction would close out at the end of 2019. There's a bunch of shoreline stabilization work that would need to occur during this time of year and into the first part of 2020 when the water's down, so we can get in there while the water is low, and we'll make improvements. And then you can imagine coming out of 2020 into the spring, it will really look like a nice public space. But that's what will be there. This parking lot, that restaurant obviously wouldn't be there, but the parking lot would be here, this road would be constructed, and this public space would be ready to go in the spring of 2020.
Okay, okay, thank you. That's the questions I have. And John, go ahead.
Good presentation, Phil. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd say that, the question here tonight is whether the redevelopment plan is in conformance with the comp plan. I think that the subdivision plans, the PUD, the design standards, that's going to come later, and that's the details. We'll get to see that again. But for tonight, the decision is whether this is in conformance with the comp plan. I think you've made an excellent case that, against that whole list of objectives that's in our staff report, in our findings that you covered, you've made an excellent supporting case that it is. But if that's not enough, I'd like to just read, Chairman, you tell us to read our comp plan. I cracked it out last night, and I happened to bring it with me. It's right here.
Thank you very much for listening.
Page 69 of that, I want to just take a second. While that image is right there and fresh in your mind, let me read just a little bit of what it talks about. This was when the comp plan was done 10 years ago. And it's describing the Spokane River of tomorrow, which is today.
Right.
And it says that generally, and see if that isn't what we're talking about. Generally, the Spokane River District is envisioned to be mixed-use neighborhoods consisting of housing and commercial retail and service activities that embrace the aesthetics and the proximity to the river. And the characteristics will be various commercial, residential, and mixed uses. Public access should be provided to the river. Open space, parks, bicycle connections, and public spaces provided especially adjacent to the river. Street networks that are interconnected, defining and creating smaller residential blocks. To me, this is exactly as described. Yeah. So I can't imagine how we could see other than this not meeting the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, John, for pointing that out. Appreciate it. Questions? No more?
Okay,
Thanks, Phil.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Chairman?
Yes.
One thing I wanted to also ask, if Phil could pull up the image showing the urban renewal districts, the expansion. I just wanted to point out, there are a couple areas where we're having to do de-annexations to then include into other districts, and that's kind of a critical part of this. So when we make the findings, we have to go in a certain order, because the River District is one where there's going to be some de-annexation of property to be included in the new Atlas District, and then that's true of the Lake District as well. So those are all shown on that exhibit. I just wanted to make sure that was in the record.
Because we have 3 sets of findings.
We do, and we'll have to do those each separately.
Yeah, we'll do each, like, after this, we'll
Yes.
do our next finding, so
Okay.
that's my
Thank you.
next question. Thanks, Phil,
Yep,
appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Do you want me to leave that up, Hillary? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay. I bring you to the commissioners.
With that said, I would motion that as far as the Second Amendment to the River District redevelopment plan as presented, that we make a finding that it is in all respects in conformity with the comprehensive plan. And as Mr. Boyd pointed out, he pointed out both graphically and his arguments and commentary that it does indeed support each and every objective that is listed in our findings worksheet. So recommend that we make a finding for that it's in conformity to the comp plan.
And do you want to list some goals on that?
I would not think that would be necessary, having suggested that it meets them all.
And this is for the River District,
Correct.
first of 3.
I'll second that.
I have a first by Ingalls, second by Fleming. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay. The Second Amendment to the River District redevelopment plan passes unanimously. Next, we have Second Amendment to the Second Amended and Restated Midtown Northwest Boulevard Downtown Urban Renewal Plan, now referred to as the Lake District Urban Renewal Project Plan. That's a mouthful.
That's in here.
Hillary, do you have anything to add, or Phil, anything to add besides what we already heard?
No, I think you had the
Okay.
great discussion, complete record
Okay.
for us. If you want to just do the same thing, go through the findings and,
Yeah, we'll go through the
okay,
findings.
thank you.
So, again, I give it to the commissioners. Who would like to make a motion? Mike?
I'll make a motion, yep, that we adopt the request for the Second Amendment to the Second Amended and Restated Midtown Northwest Boulevard Downtown Urban Renewal Plan, now referred to as the Lake District Urban Renewal Project Plan of the Coeur d'Alene Urban Renewal Agency, doing business as Ignite CDA for conformity with the City of Coeur d'Alene's comprehensive plan, and we ask that it's forwarded to the City Council with our recommendation to adopt it.
Okay. I have a first by Ward.
Second?
I have a second by Mandel. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
The Second Amendment, which I'm not going to read all over again, has been passed. The next is the Urban Renewal Plan for the Atlas Urban Renewal Project. Once again, I'll ask Hillary or Phil if they have anything additional. No? Then I give it to the commissioners. Someone to make a motion?
I'll move that we have the findings and for the urban renewal plan for the Atlas Urban Renewal Project, and that the Planning Commission has determined the plan is in all respects in conformity with the comp plan.
Thank you. I have a first from Fleming. I need a second.
Second.
I have a second by Lutrip. Roll call. Shannon, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Urban Renewal Plan for the Atlas Urban Renewal Project. And that, I believe, concludes the River District. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Look forward to additional meetings. Next item on our agenda is administrative item I-2-18, interpretation request for front setback requirement for Mill River PUD. Go ahead, Hillary.
Great, thank you. So this is a request for an interpretation of the front yard setbacks for Mill River. And so the request before you this evening is whether or not they can go back to the previous way that we would measure the front yard setback. So earlier this year, the Planning Commission recommended to City Council. Council adopted a zoning code amendment, and that changed how we measured front yard setbacks. So they wanted to go back to the previous way, which was just from property line versus measuring from the back of sidewalk, because by doing the new way of measurements affects them by approximately 5 feet in how they would have to kind of measure that. So as this exhibit shows you, this is in the staff report, where the property line is in relation to the back of sidewalk, the old setback and the new setback. What's different in Mill River than some areas of the city, this is a PUD, but they did not specify the front yard setbacks. They were relying on the city code other than if there was a common or a shared driveway. There are several lots in here where they have not been developed yet and they don't have common driveways. And so they were concerned that there's going to be some inconsistency in how they're developed, and then it also shrinks their building envelope if they were to use the new measurement from our code. This would apply to just the non-waterfront R8 PUD, so these areas that are outlined in kind of the white dash line shown in green. And the other thing to point out with this subdivision is that the driveways are plenty long. A lot of times when we have the 20-foot setback, it's because we're also allowing for the driveway to make sure there's room for the cars, but the driveways in this development are very large because they have the garages at the rear. And so this is the request for you this evening, is basically to kind of revert back to how the measurements would have been done in the past, and that is from the property line for that front yard setback of 20 feet.
So that affects 6 lots, basically, is that right?
Yes, and that was what we would like to request, is that if the commission accepts this interpretation, that it's for any of the undeveloped lots, and that could be if there's new development in the future as well, but just the R8 non-waterfront lots. But right now, yes, that is, there's 6 lots shown there that are not yet developed where they'd like to apply this setback interpretation. And the applicant is here if there are any questions of him.
Any questions of Hillary?
I have a quick question. I'm looking at, in our packet, a current aerial photo showing old versus new setback.
Yes.
And that, I just want to make sure that is actually a zoom in of, yeah, there we go. Look, it appears to be next to that cluster of blue vacant lots. Is that what we're looking at? Is that a zoom in of?
Oh, let's see.
I just want to make sure
It's, yeah.
This is not a random.
I think it's that, yeah, I believe it's that one right there.
Question. Not sure which.
I suspect that that's what they're.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this is.
I believe it was, yeah, looking at some of these.
It's like a little lot
Lots.
with a lot of dirt still that's not in blue,
Right,
and that's what we're looking at there. Is that correct?
yes. And the other thing to point out on this, it looks like this house is in the setback now, but the front porches are allowed to encroach anyway, the additional 10 feet.
Okay.
So while it looks like there's structure, that's largely the front porch and the roof over the porch area.
Okay.
Question, if I could. So as part of a long housekeeping amendment to the planning code, the setback clarification of how you measured it has been fixed, and that was this year, correct?
Has, yes.
And so developments that have already been platted, does it govern in those areas?
It would in the case of, like, so for Mill River, they did not come up with their own front yard setback. All the planned unit developments in the city that already govern or have specified what their setbacks are, those would apply, that would supersede the code. But in the cases where they don't, like Mill River, it basically would revert to whatever the city code is. And so as we change the code from time to time, then they would have to apply with the revised setbacks. And so in this case, they didn't expect that we were going to change that at some point in the future, and so they're trying to figure out how to deal with that new change.
So when we made that clarification, it's not going to affect other large areas of the city?
This interpretation is just for Mill River.
Gotcha. Does staff have a recommendation?
No, it's really up to the pleasure of the commission and how you'd like to apply this. We did let the applicant know that this was an option for them to come forward to the commission, and it's not an unreasonable request, at least from staff's opinion.
And here in the letter from the applicant, it says lots 17, 19, 23, and I guess the remaining lots that haven't been developed.
Right.
Do you have any idea how many of that might be?
Well, as shown on here, there's 6 that are undeveloped. These other ones showing here, I think there's already approved plans for those, so it's really these 6. But in discussing it with my staff members, we wanted to make sure the interpretation was for all of Mill River for the R8 non-waterfront, in case in the future someone needs to rebuild their house or something, then they're also not having a different setback
Okay.
standard.
One of the goals is to have it sort of straight, isn't it? On the different properties. Instead
Having
of
it
having them go
straight.
back and forth. Well, the different setbacks. So if we did not approve this, there'd be one unit would have one setback, another would have it. It would seem to me to be a little confusing and not in keeping with what our integrity of trying to have a more established and set property line for people.
That's, the applicant has indicated that that's their preference. We did look at some of the built homes out there and some of the approved, and there is some variation, but I think, that's, the argument is that they intended for them all to be able to be 20 feet from property line and not have to be staggered back additionally.
This seems like a reasonable request.
Any other questions for Hillary? No? I need a motion. From someone?
I'll move that we allow a continuation of the current construction setbacks predating our change of our code. And I'm going to see how you state that, best way to say it.
I would just probably,
Revert to
the
Where are
dash
we?
one. Right here.
1-2-18, interpretation of setbacks for Mill River, that will hold to the previous 5-foot forward setback from the front of the sidewalk, or from the front of the property line, 20-foot setback, instead of our new code, which is 20 feet off of the inside line of the sidewalk.
Okay. I have a motion by Fleming. I need a second.
I'll second.
I have a second by Lutrick. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, sorry, I misspoke. I had a second by Rumpler, not Rupert. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. 1-2-18, interpretation of setbacks for Mill River is approved. Next, we have a public hearing. Tammy will give us a presentation.
Thank you.
And this item is A-4-18, zoning prior to annexation of a plus or minus 4.99 acre parcel from ag suburban to R1 residential at 1 unit per acre.
There are 2 parts to this request, the annexation that I'll go through first, and then the second part is a request for some special use permits. And I'll briefly go through the second one since it'll be duplicate photos and so on, but stop me if you have any questions. So the applicant this evening is Gordon Dobler Engineering, and the owner is Lake City Baptist Church. The request for zoning designation prior to annexation, a 4.99 acre parcel on the east side of Ramsey Road. And again, the request for the zoning designation is R1, residential at 1 unit per acre. This is a vicinity map, and to get in perspective, Prairie Avenue, Ramsey Road, and this is the subject property right here. And this is a Exxon station, coffee stand. You guys have seen some annexations come in this area recently. And this is a close-up of the subject property. There's currently an existing structure on here, which is a church with an outbuilding and a parking lot that exists with 22 parking stalls. This is the annexation map that the applicant has submitted, and it is contiguous with city boundaries with the exception of this area here, and it does meet the requirement to be contiguous. This is an annexation history map, and this is the subject property. So recently, as I mentioned, you've had some annexations come in this area in 2016, and this area was annexed in 17, and so on. Go ahead and provide some site photos. This is a view of the subject property looking east toward the existing church facility. And it's noted in the narrative that there are some existing trees on the site that you can see here. And in the background is the existing church. And this is a view of the subject property looking southeast at the existing church facility and the parking area. There's a lot of the other trees on the site as well. View of the subject property looking east at the existing storage building and parking lot. And this is a view from the subject property, parking lot looking north toward Prairie Avenue. And this is looking south toward the single-family neighborhood. And this is looking west toward Ramsey Road. I believe this is Province 20 over here, existing neighborhood. As far as the R1 zoning district, it's intended as a residential area that permits single-family detached housing, one dwelling unit per gross acre. And I will go through all 4 of these findings. That this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. And the land use category is Ramsey Woodland, and it is located in the transition area. These areas are where the character of the neighborhood is in transition and should be developed with care. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land use are expected to change greatly within the planning period. And this is the area, the subject property, which is the green area in transition. And there's Ramsey Woodland today. And Ramsey Woodland tomorrow, as characteristics of the neighborhood have, for the most part, been established and should be maintained. Development in this area will continue to grow in a stable manner, with lower density zoning districts will intermingle with existing Coeur d'Alene Place plan unit development, providing a variety of housing types. The northern boundary is the edge of the community, offering opportunities for infill. And that was noted on the annexation map, where we've had a number of annexations over the years. And here are the characteristics of the Ramsey Woodland neighborhoods listed in your staff report. And here are some objectives out of the comprehensive plan, and they're also noted in your staff report. Finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are or not available and adequate for the proposed use. Staff comments are on pages 7 and 8, and I'll give you a brief summary of those. Stormwater will be addressed as the area proposed for the annexation develops. It's anticipated that residential developments will typically utilize curb-adjacent swales to manage the site runoff. And the proposed annexation would not likely adversely affect the surrounding area with regard to traffic. Ramsey Road has the available capacity to accommodate the additional traffic generated from this subject site, and that was provided by Chris Bosley, our city engineer. And as far as streets, the subject site is currently developed. The site has frontage along the east side of Ramsey Road. Adequate right-of-way does not exist on the east side of Ramsey Road. 50 feet of right-of-way must be provided east of the center line to accommodate the existing street and future improvements. Any necessary improvements to the site would be addressed during the site development process. And then Water Department reported that any additional main extensions and/or fire hydrants and services will be the responsible of the developer at their expense. But there is a 12-inch water main in Ramsey Road. And wastewater noted that the nearest public sanitary sewer is located within Ramsey Road right-of-way, which borders the westerly boundary of the subject property. And the city's wastewater utility presently has the wastewater capacity and willingness to serve it as proposed. And the last comment was the fire department. They work with engineering, water, building departments to ensure the design of any proposal meets mandated safety requirements for the city and its residents. And the fire department would address all concerns at site and building permit submittals. So finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site make or do not make it suitable for the request at the time. The 4.99 acre parcel is located on the east side of Ramsey Road, and it's about a quarter mile south of Prairie Avenue. It has the frontage along Ramsey Road and is generally flat, with mature pine trees and fir trees on the site. As I mentioned, there's an existing church structure and a storage building with parking on the eastern portion of the subject property, and the physical characteristics of the site make it suitable for this request at the time. And then as far as finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. The church is currently being used, and it's been in existence for approximately 25 years, as noted in the narrative. The property owner is requesting to be annexed in at the R1 zoning district, and in addition, a religious assembly special use permit and community education special use permit are also being requested. There are vacant properties to the northeast, which are still within the county, and the property is currently an island in the county surrounded by the city boundaries. As I mentioned, the religious assembly and community assembly special use permit are requested to allow that use to continue as far as the church, and I'll get into the addition of a small school in the future there. The county zoning northeast of the subject property is vacant and zoned ag suburban. And I mentioned that traffic would not be an issue with this proposal. Generalized existing land uses, and this is a subject property. There's an existing subdivision as noted here, and this is vacant currently, as well as this being in the county and vacant, and then some commercial uses just on the south side of Prairie Avenue. And the existing zoning, this is a single-family neighborhood zoned R5. Commercial uses and commercial zoning here. And then this would be R1 with the existing church. Proposed items for the annexation agreement. As far as the building department, they ask that we add, prior to the completion of the annexation, the applicant must address any outstanding code violations for the existing structures on site, if there are any. And then, as I mentioned in the staff report, 50 feet of right-of-way must be provided east of the center line on Ramsey Road to accommodate the existing street and future improvements. And the applicant has received a staff report, and those items were noted in the staff report. Any questions for staff?
Is there a sign-up sheet?
There is. And one last item. The Planning
I'll go grab
Commission must consider this request and make the appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice.
Questions? Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome.
I take it the applicant is here. Come on up, Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Hold it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Gordon, let me swear you in.
Oh, yeah, I swear.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The two hearings are really tied together, but we'll go through it. I just have a brief summary. My presentation covers both of them, so maybe you get to hear it twice. We'll see. So we know where we're at off of Ramsey Road. It's pretty straightforward, I think. You've got a use that's been existing for 25 plus years. You know, the zone request is, this is a larger site plan. Properties within the area city impact. It's an island surrounded by the city on 3 out of the 4 sides. Annexation obviously would provide for more efficient services. You've got police and fire that technically don't serve this, although practically I think they do, plowing Ramsey Road. So when you annex islands, that's the result. And I believe it's consistent with the goals of the comp plan. You guys will make that decision, but I think in short, because you have an existing use, the neighborhood's grown up around it. In R1 zoning, there's really a few reasons for that. That it's been a church for 25 years. They intend for it to go on being a church. I understand that the special use permit is needed with an R1 zone, but I think one of the only zones that's allowed by right is the C17, which really didn't seem like a good fit. It seemed like overkill for continuing the use of a church. So, and then there's an economic aspect of it where annexation fees are based on the zoning. But I think the more important fit was a residential zone with the special use permit. The applicant agreed. So that's really the reason for the R1 request. And I think the upside is should it ever want to be anything else, because it's an R1, it's going to come back to the Planning Commission for review and approval. So this is kind of I would think from the Planning Commission standpoint, a positive. Existing approved access onto Ramsey Road. You heard Tammy report the staff's comments that all of the infrastructure has adequate capacity. I mean, really, there's not going to be any impact that isn't there already because the use is existing. We're not proposing any intensification. We get into the special use permit, we talk about the school a little bit, but I think you'll see and agree that even with the small school, there won't be an intensification of the use. So we have adequate capacity. You know what, let's just stop right there then. Okay.
Okay.
That's really it.
Any questions for Gordon? Oh, thanks, Gordon, appreciate it. Gordon was the only gentleman on the sign-up sheet, so at this time, I will close public testimony and bring it to the commission for a motion.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Go right ahead. Thank you.
And I assume we're going to take the annexation first and the special
Yeah,
use
well-
ordinance. Okay. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on November 13th, 2018, and there being present a person requesting approval of item A-4-18, a request for zoning prior to annexation from county ag suburban to city R1, residential at 1 acre, 1 unit per acre zoning district. The applicant is Lake City Baptist Church. The location is plus or minus 4.99 acre parcel located on the east side of Ramsey Road and south of Prairie Avenue. I would urge adoption of findings B1 through B7. Excuse me. B8, that this proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan policy as follows, and instead of reading them all, I'm going to read a select few if that's okay. I would urge objective 1.11, community design. Objective 1.12, community design, support the enhancement of existing urbanized areas and discourage sprawl. Objective 1.14, efficiency, promote the efficient use of existing infrastructure, thereby reducing the impacts of undeveloped areas. Objective 4.02, city services, provide quality services to all of our residents, including water, sewer, stormwater systems, et cetera. And public participation, strive for community involvement is broad-based and inclusive, encouraging public participation in the decision-making process. B9, the public facilities and utilities are available and adequate for the proposed use. This is based on staff report and the applicant's testimony. B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable for the request at this time because the topography is essentially uniform throughout the area. And of course, also the staff report. B11, that the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. And again, per the staff report, there was no suggested issues with any of those matters. So, conclusion decision: the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of Lake City Baptist Church for the zoning prior to annexation, as described in the application, should be approved. There are some suggested provisions for inclusion in an annexation agreement as follows. Building prior to the Prior to the completion of the annexation, the applicant must address any outstanding code violations for the existing structures on site, and that engineering 50 feet of right-of-way must be provided east of the center line of Ramsey Road to accommodate the existing street and future improvements.
Thank you. I have a first.
I'll second that.
I have a second by Fleming. Roll call. Shannon, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay. What was that? 8-4-18 is passed. Thank you. And next item is SP-12-18, special use permit request for religious assembly and a community education uses in a proposed R1 zone.
All right, thank you. I'll make this fairly brief, since we've already gone through a lot of the same information. Applicant Gordon Dobler, Dobler Engineering, Lake City Baptist Church is the owner. And the request this evening, religious assembly and community education special use permit. And we covered the location outlined here in the red on the east side of Ramsey Road. That's the aerial of the subject property. This was a conceptual site plan submitted to us. This is the existing sanctuary with the office and the proposed classrooms. There is an existing storage building on the site. 22 parking stalls exist, and this would be the area of a future classroom. And this is an aerial. We just added some call-outs here to get a better picture of it. This is the upper level floor plan. It doesn't appear that they're going to make any changes to the upper floor plan of the sanctuary. The lower level, this is a proposed classroom area, another classroom area, and then they'll add a third somewhere in this space. And here are the findings I will cover. And again, finding B8A, the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. It is in the Ramsey Woodland area, and it is in transition. There are some objectives here on the slide, but there are additional ones included in your staff report on page 6. And finding B8B, design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on the adjacent properties. And we previously discussed the adjacent properties and that this is currently in an island. There are single families to the south, vacant property to the north, as well as some commercial properties. This property has been in use as a church for approximately 25 years. And so that would allow the use to continue when it's annexed, and then it would also approve the use for community education with the addition of a couple classrooms within that building and a future classroom or so on that site. And I'm going to quickly go through these site photos since we've already talked about them during the annexation. And the zoning around it, we've talked about that. C-17 to the north, R5 to the south, and the proposed R1. The R1 district by special use permit has a number of allowed uses if approved by the Planning Commission, and community education, religious assembly are both on that list. This is the land use map, again, the subject property here, with some vacant property surrounding it and residential uses. Finding B8C, location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by the existing streets, public facilities, and services. That information is noted in your staff report as far as the utilities, and I've already covered it. City staff did not have any objection to the special use permit as proposed. There was one recommended condition from the water department, and this will also be discussed when the applicants come in for a project review and discuss the proposed classroom, so it will be covered again. And the action alternatives, the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. I know that was a pretty quick presentation, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Go ahead, John.
Question, Tammy, if I could. Would you mind pulling up the conceptual site plan, please? Thank you. There was a there, that one.
Okay.
Thank you. So I peeked at the sign-up sheet, and there's nobody on there. So I'm guessing that everybody to the south there in those houses are relatively happy, or
We didn't get any response from anyone.
they'd be here. And I would be too, if I was in one of those houses. I think it'd be pretty okay. I'm all for the annexation. As Mr. Dobler points out, I think closing these islands up islands are freeloaders. They are being plowed and swept and policed and fired and all that for nothing, you know. They belong in the city. They're effectively in the city. It makes a ton of sense. Back to that photo right there. Nobody's here to talk to us from those houses because it's already developed. Everything's hunky-dory. Everything's great out there. You see all those trees are buffering it very nicely, and that's great. My only teeny lick of concern here would be that when we issue the special use permit without any condition other than the water one, which is really on the scale of this thing. You know, so you said a little, and we have a little box there saying a little classroom, and we presume it's going to be the existing sanctuary. But does the special use permit open the door? And I don't think, you know, the Baptist church is going to do something nefarious and after they get their special use permit, bulldoze the thing down and put one of these mega churches, you know, like that Jumbo in Post Falls. Nothing against that, but it needs to go maybe through a little different filter than, you know, I mean, I don't see anything on this, in other words, that kind of ties, that doesn't become a lock, does it?
No, it does not. It's just a conceptual.
So what locks in the scale and size of this thing? So, you know, if say we approve this, you know, a development plan comes in to build, you know, a very, very large sanctuary, 5 times that size, and the classroom is way bigger than that. I mean, you know, that's the only teeny lick of concern here.
Yeah,
And
it is a
if
blanket.
that happened, I would have a different opinion if I lived in one of those houses, where right now, if I assumed it's just what I see there in this concept plan, I'd be very happy. Do you
Yeah,
understand?
once you approve the special use permit, it's a blanket use to allow for the religious assembly and community education.
Should there be something that kind of, you know, defines the scale?
That would be entirely up to you. Years ago, the Planning Commission used to tie the site plan, which this doesn't indicate a lot, you know, as far as that future building, but they used to tie the approval to the site plan. But then staff would have to continue to come back for a modification of the special use permit, and eventually you went away with that. So that would be entirely up to you. And the applicant may be able to speak a little more to that, as far as what that anticipated, you know, building size would be and what they want to accommodate. Parking also drives it, although this is a large site, but parking does drive what they do.
Not crying that the sky is falling by any stretch. I'm just pointing out that, you know, it is a bit of an open checkbook, and what I see there is great. What could happen potentially, and maybe this doesn't happen with a religious type of development, I wouldn't guess, as if we were talking about the same kind of concept, but with a commercial sort of driver.
Any other questions? No. Thanks, Tammy. Gordon, do you want to address anything that you just heard?
Well, let me speak directly to John's concerns.
Not a huge concern.
It's the same dilemma we have with zoning prior to annexation. You know, you zone as a C-17, and, you know, that allows for anything. I mean, there's no guarantees on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's existed in this form for 25 years. There's a good probability that it'll continue in that same. The reason for this is really, quite frankly, to avoid, if they wanted to add another classroom or two, coming back and having to amend a special use permit. And as Tammy said, we used to tie it to the site plans, but that got to be onerous. So I wish I could stand here and say, yeah, don't worry about it. I can't do that, but I can offer some response to say, while we think that could happen in this case, I think the probability is really fairly small. Parking does drive it, but it's a 5-acre site. I would think if they had plans for huge expansions, we would have seen something by now. Really, I suppose that's all I can say on that.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm comfortable. I just
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to
it's
hear.
a
I
good
just wanted to
point.
hear that kind of assurance, and I think
Yeah.
again, if it was a similar scenario, but a commercial
Yes.
driver in that area with those houses, I'd have a different
Yeah, I would agree.
worry.
I would agree. We'd say, you know,
Thank you.
let me see. Well, I mean, I went to the trouble to, present it all. I do have just a quick summary. God, if I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, here we go. So special use permit, the property's already been used as a religious assembly since inception. So the special use permit really continues that in addition to the small school. So it allows, and they'd like I said, they'd like to offer small private classes. The existing building is not really big enough to do much more than that. If it takes off, they would, like we said, they would add another few classrooms, and parking would have to come with that. We'd have to go through all of that exercise, meet parking code for whatever they decide to add. Both uses are compatible. You have the church on the weekends, the school during the weekdays. I did provide a parking analysis. I think it's in your staff report to show that we have plenty of parking to support both uses. And then, like I said, if and when the future expansion happens, we would have to add parking at that time. I think that's it.
Any questions? Oh, thanks, Gordon, appreciate it. It's time I'll close public testimony and give it to the commissioners to make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on November 13, 2018, and there being present a person requesting approval of item SP-12-18, a religious assembly community education special use permit in the R1 zoning district. The applicant is Lake City Baptist Church. The location is a plus-minus 4.99 acre parcel located on the east side of Ramsey Road and south of Prairie Avenue. The justification for the criteria, standards, and facts suggest that we adopt items B1 to B7 as stated. For B8, pursuant to section 17.09.220, the special use permit criteria, a special use permit may be approved only if the proposal conforms to all of the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. Specifically, I would suggest that for B8A, the proposal is in conformance with a comprehensive plan, specifically Objective 1.12, Community Design, and Objective 1.14, Efficiency, and Objective 4.02, City Services. For B8B, the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. This is based on the density and intensity of the project fit, the proposed development and its compatibility with the existing land use pattern, and the design and appearance of the project is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Item B8C, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. Based on the criteria that water is available, sewer services can be provided, and police and fire provide reasonable service to the property, or already do. For order, conclusion, and decision, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that Lake City Baptist Church for a special use permit as described in the application should be approved with the special conditions related to water, a minimum of a double check valve assembly to be required on the main domestic supply before any downstream connection. I think that's the only condition.
Okay, I have a motion by Mandel.
I'll second.
I have a second by Rumpler. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
Rumpler,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, SP-12-18 passes. Thank you. That would conclude our meeting. I call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a
Seconded.
motion by English. I have Ingalls. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and good night.